Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to Junction Reads on this very sunny, beautiful Mother's Day. I realized when I looked at the May schedule that I didn't really think it through very well. I had to, I have to look at May and all of the other bigger months a little more closely next season. So I really do appreciate you coming. Charlotte Mendel is here to read from Reversing Time, her latest novel, which is a YA fantasy fiction. And I am excited to hear you read from it and to talk about the book and the creation of it. Before we get started, I'm going to share an acknowledgement of land. And for anyone who is not in Toronto, please feel free to share an acknowledgement either in the chat or just personally. Junction Reads is in Toronto, which for thousands of years has been the traditional land of the Wendat Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and most recently, the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nation. I am specifically in Adubagok, the place of the alders in Michisagic language. Both are still home to many Indigenous people across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work in their community on their territory. Thank you, Charlotte Mendel, for joining us. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us today. Can you share, before we get started, what you are reading?
All right, so I've just gotten out of the library, The Ministry of the Future, which I've heard from friends is really good. And what's especially good about it is that it's a little bit like Reversing Time. It's sort of grappling with one of the biggest issues that the human race will ever grapple with, the climate crisis. But it's not a really despondent book. And I think one of the problems with galvanizing people to recognize that this is the biggest crisis and that what we do individually does matter. There's a lot of gloom and doom. You turn on the media, there's gloom and doom. And a lot of the cli-fi books, like the climate fiction books, which is actually a growing genre, it's a post-apocalyptic world. It's like also like as though it's already happened, and wow, this is a time that we have to really, come together and make change. And the scientists tell us that, so it's definitely true. So I'm very eager to read this book to see if that author also felt that the language needs to be a little bit more positive, because like Zelensky, he's not saying to the people, when the Russians get you, we're screwed. They're much bigger. Yeah. He's saying we're going to fight, and that's the language we really need, and that's what I try to do in Reversing Time. And I think the Ministry of the Future is going to be like that too. And I just read a Louise Penny book, and I have to say, I heard a lot of positive things about her too. So you can never tell, because reading is a very subjective experience. But I totally wasn't impressed by her. I thought it was pretty crap, actually.
And was that one of her, I can't remember the name of the detective. That one of
Devils Are Here. All the Devils Are Here. It was a detective book.
Yeah. And was it that she's got one particular detective who is throughout or in a lot of her books, and I don't know.
Gamachis. Do you like her?
Yeah. No, to be honest, I haven't read her. It's not, I'm generally not I can't even explain what my writing or my reading style is. I like eclectic stories. And so I tend to pick up books that have characters who are living different lives. And yeah, I don't know.
That's interesting. Yeah, I like
with the limited time I spend reading. I tend to not spend it reading people who are making lots and lots of money. And I know that's terrible. It's a really terrible thing to say, but yeah, that's where I am.
Depends if they deserve it. If they deserve it, then that's like the J.K. Rowling books. It was just like, ooh, this is making a whole bunch of generation of kids, whether you like it or not. A whole generation of kids started to read and get excited about reading. And I thought, like, I deeply appreciate those that do that type of work. So I don't regret her money, but some of them you think, wow, how does this happen?
Yeah. No, that's great. And I love honest reviews. So that's appreciated as well. Before I introduce you and reading, would you mind if I share your biography with everybody?
Great.
Good. Charlotte Mendel was born in Nova Scotia and spent 3 years traveling around the world, working in France, England, Turkey, Israel, and India. She is the author of Turn Us Again, which won the HR Percy Novel Prize, the Beacon Award for Social Justice, and the Atlantic Book Award in the Margaret and John Savage First Book category. Her second novel, A Hero, was shortlisted for the 2016 William Saroyan International Prize for Writing and was a finalist in the 2016 International Book Awards in the General Fiction category. Charlotte currently lives in Enfield with 20 chickens, 4 goats, 3 sheep, 2 cats, 2 children, 1 husband, and thousands of bees. Sounds as utopic as Simon's Mother's World in Reversing Time. Will you read for us?
I would love to read for you and
Thank
for
you
everybody
so
else
much.
here.
Thanks.
Thank you all for coming. I know that it's a lovely day. Well, here in Nova Scotia, it's a lovely day outside. The weather's getting warmer and we're all sick of Zoom. So I really appreciate it. And I hope I earn the honor of your presence by entertaining you. So I'm going to read 2 little blurbs from the book. The first one, so Simon is your average teenage kid. He's a little bit, gentle and fearful. He comes from a slightly dysfunctional family. His mother is basically depressive, who is fairly catatonic in the beginning of the book, and his father like holds a family together. He works hard, he holds the family together, and Simon is bullied at school, and the bullies kind of lie in wait for him after school. He rushes home like crazy, and once he's very, one day they were very close behind him, and he ran into his father's workshop, and it used to be a house. There was a dumbwaiter there, so he jumps into the dumbwaiter, and the dumbwaiter goes down into a basement that's not supposed to exist, and in the basement there's a trunk, and in the trunk there's a talisman. I'm just going to show the talisman. And in this talisman, he's amazed to see it. He gets out of the basement through the window. The trunk allows him to reach the window, and he shows it to his parents, and both his parents go crazy. They both lunge at the talisman, and the mother turns to the father and takes the knife and says, "I'm going to kill you." And Simon's thinking, what is going on here? And so he rushes up to his room and locks the door. And the next morning, the mother tries to talk to him through the door. She leaves. The next morning he comes down and he goes to school. And again, the bullies are waiting for him. And he's put the talisman under his shirt in order to keep it from both of his crazy parents. And he's coming home from school, and again, the bullies are lying in wait for him. And he has one friend at school called Sandra, who's a very sweet, he has slightly romantic feelings about her. So I'm now beginning from then. That's very near the beginning, because all of this happens in the first couple of chapters. None of the bullies were in the classroom. So for once, Simon could saunter out like a normal student, except his heart was heavy with dread. Sandra linked arms with him, but he shook her off. "This isn't a stroll along the promenade. You've got to be ready to run." Sandra giggled. "Promenade? Where'd you come up with them words?" Simon didn't answer. He walked slowly, swiveling his head in all directions as he checked the ground, the sky to either side of him. Sandra sensed his nervousness and punched him playfully. "Hey, listen up. I'm with you, remember? I can beat those wusses with one hand." "Don't be ridiculous. There's 3 of them and they're all Neanderthals." But Sandra's compact, muscly body gave him courage. She probably was a much better fighter than him. In any case, 2 against 3 was a lot better than 1. They walked slowly, Simon shushing Sandra every time she talked. His 360-degree scrutiny paid off. They had a second's warning when Sean and Tyler erupted from behind parked cars on the other side of the road. Simon and Sandra spun in unison and started running back towards the school. And then the bullies' plan became clear as Jake leapt from behind a bush directly in their path. They must have passed Jake's hiding place, but Simon hadn't noticed, despite his care. 2 chasing them from behind, 1 in front. Simon pivoted sideways and began to run up someone's driveway. "Let's fight!" Sandra screamed, grabbing a walker and hurling it at Jake, smacking him right on the chest. He howled in pain and doubled over. "Run!" Simon yelled over his shoulder, half ashamed that he'd already taken to his heels, leaving Sandra to attack alone. From his periphery vision, he saw her pelt past the crumpled Jake back towards the school. A rock came sailing past his shoulder. Shit, she's given the morons a new idea, Simon thought. He could see that both Sean and Tyler were chasing after him, leaving Sandra to her own devices. He was alone again. A constricted, miserable feeling stained his heart like mold. He vaulted over the fence separating the yards and raced over someone else's property. He would probably get lost. He was sick of this, running, frightened, bullied every day. A sick mother who was now crazy. She'd probably do something terrible and get locked away. He hated his life. Simon stumbled over the unfamiliar terrain. There was some type of backyard waterfall coming up. Simon veered around it and headed for the road beyond. He didn't have to turn around to know the bullies were closing in. He could hear their rasping breath. 2, 3, he was sick to death of running. He was sick of his miserable life. A rock sailed through the air and cracked against the asphalt. Then one thudded against his shoulder, sending a jolt of pain shooting up his neck and jerking him forward. He stumbled and almost fell. Tears rose unbidden to his eyes. How could those morons throw rocks and run so fast at the same time? I hate my life. I hate my life. Simon knew the tears would blind him, slowing him down. He wasn't sure he cared. Let them catch him. Let them beat him up. Maybe the physical pain would alleviate the heaviness weighing on his heart. The pendant thumped unpleasantly against his chest in time to his strides. He pressed it still with one hand. Another rock whooshed over his head. She was dead. The ragged breaths of his pursuers seemed to be getting closer, but he didn't dare look over his shoulder to check. Looking back slowed you down. I wish I was done with school, done with that miserable house and my crap parents. I wish I was 18. A strange whistling invaded his ears. His vision went dark, as though someone had slipped a blindfold over his eyes. The strangest sensation enveloped his body. It felt like a strong wind was spinning him around, lifting his feet off the ground. He opened his mouth to cry out, but before the sound materialized, he felt cold tile under his knees, and the darkness fell away from his eyes. He lifted his head. He was crouching on the floor outside a half-open door. A long corridor stretched in either direction, with similar doors lining it on both sides. He was alone in the corridor, although many of the doors were half open and he could hear a jumble of voices. Music was blaring from a door down the hall. Rigid with surprise and wondering what the hell was going on, Simon watched a girl and a boy just a few years older than him emerge from one of the doors in deep conversation and stride up the hallway. He jumped to his feet as they passed him, embarrassed to be crouching on the floor, but they didn't pay him any attention. "Excuse me," he whispered. "What is this place?" The couple ignored him. He cleared his throat. "Excuse me." They glanced back at him without breaking stride. "Where am I?" "You're in Clancy Hall," one replied unhelpfully. Simon watched the couple disappear around the end of the corridor and turned back to the half-open door nearest him. He poked his head inside. The first thing he saw was a colored shag rug that was usually slung across his bedroom floor, except this wasn't his bedroom. He didn't recognize the room. It was much smaller than his room at home. There was a single bed in the corner, and the sun blazing through the window on the opposite wall illuminated the piles of books and papers strewn over the floor. A young man sat at a desk in the corner of the room with his back to Simon, peering at a laptop. Simon felt embarrassed and confused. He was about to clear his throat to announce his uninvited presence when someone shoved by him, propelling him into the room. Another young man entered and flung himself across the bed. "Jesus, Simon, haven't you finished studying yet? I told Owen we'd meet him for lunch." Simon jumped when he heard his name, smiling uncertainly at the man on the bed. The man looked at him in surprise. "You didn't tell me you had a younger brother, Simon." The man sitting at the desk turned around. Do you mind waiting outside, Chad? I just need another 5 minutes and I'll finish faster if you're not breathing down my neck." "All right, but get a move on. We're supposed to meet Owen 10 minutes ago." The man strolled out, winking at Simon on his way. As soon as he was gone, the man at the desk jumped to his feet and locked the door. As he did so, Simon looked directly in his face. The cry that had lodged in his throat burst forth. The man had his face, and he was looking right at him. "This is your first time, isn't it?" he asked. The first time for what?" The young man laughed delightedly. "I remember it. I remember every detail. Those bastards chasing me and throwing rocks." Simon felt faint. "Chasing you? Please, what's going on?" The young man jerked slightly, almost as though he'd forgotten Simon's presence. Damn, I'm breaking the rules. Communication is strictly forbidden. What? You have to tell me. No, there are rules. Ask Mum. My mum? Simon asked uncertainly. Older Simon laughed uproariously as though he'd made a joke. Here, go on now, Scoot. Go back to your own time. And he snatched his wallet from the table and zipped out the door, apparently forgetting the 5 minutes of studying he'd intended to do in his haste to preserve the rule of no communication. Simon looked after him in consternation. His own time? How was he supposed to know how to get back? He closed his eyes. What had he been thinking when this had happened? He'd been wishing he was older. I wish I was 15. No, still in older Simon's room. He tried to recall his exact actions as he ran away from the bullies. He remembered the pendant thumping against his chest. He had grasped it in his hand to stop the thumping. Of course, that's stupid of him. He plucked the pendant from under his shirt and held it firmly in his hand. I wish I was 15. The same sensation of spinning around, the blindfold, the wind, the whistling in his ears. He had time to briefly wonder if he'd land on his feet, running away from rocks down a suburban street, before he felt solid ground beneath his soles and opened his eyes to his own familiar room. He felt exhausted. He wanted to lie on his bed and close his eyes, but somebody was pounding on the door downstairs. Toby was barking frantically. Simon closed his eyes and contemplated ignoring whoever it was. He needed to think. What the hell had just happened? But the pounding wouldn't let him think. And then he heard Sandra's voice filled with irritation. Open the friggin' door, I'm smashing it open! Come in, he shouted and raced downstairs. What took you so long? Sandra said angrily, stalking inside and blowing a cloud of smoke in his face as she pocketed her vape. Simon looked down at Toby, who was gazing at him with a bewildered expression. Hey, Toby. Simon reached a hand toward the dog. Why are you looking at me like that? Why'd you leave him outside? Sandra answered on Toby's behalf. He's been alone all day and he wants to be with you. I'd be mad too. But Toby didn't look mad. He looked puzzled, as though he didn't understand what Simon was doing in the house, because he hadn't seen him come in. Sandra, did you see what happened? Simon asked, following her into the kitchen. You ditched them, big time. Hey, is it okay if I make us a snack? Simon knew she was dying to poke around. Sure. Cookies, apples, cheese strings, and juice appeared on the table as Sandra whipped open drawers and fridges, investigating every nook and cranny with frank curiosity. So you saw them again after I'd disappeared? Yeah, I come back when I saw nobody was coming after me. Sandra crammed an entire cookie into her mouth, sending a spray of crumbs fanning outwards as she laughed. They were circling like dogs that lost the scent. Did they see you? Yeah, they asked how you disappeared like that. You must be one fast runner. Simon tossed a piece of cookie into Toby's waiting mouth as recompense for tricking him. And then he began from the very beginning. I didn't actually time that. I would like to read a couple more pages if possible, Alison. Is it possible to read a couple more? Okay, you're saying yes. I can hear you. So I'm going to go to another section towards the end. So Simon discovers his talisman, which leads to a whole series of events, one of which is that Simon becomes an activist because he's able to thank you, I saw that in the chat, he's able to travel the length and breadth of his own lifeline. So you can't, with the particular time travel in this novel, it only enables the user of the talisman to travel the length and breadth of their own lifetime. So he can only travel to the end of his life, and he sees what's going to happen, and he comes back and says, we have time to change this. The scientists are telling us, let's do it. And he becomes an activist. And one of his actions that I'm reading now is there's a bunch of trees, older trees that are scheduled to be cut down, and he has most of them are adults, but he's actually galvanized some of the kids in his school because his position as a bullied boy has changed a little bit with his activism, and so they're mostly adults, but a few other kids in the trees, and they've basically built platforms so they never have to come down, because if they leave, then the tree fellers and the will come down and cut the trees. So they're there. They've been there for about a week. Inevitably, the news came that an injunction was served against them, and the police arrived to remove them. Many of the tree huggers began to pack their stuff, but others picked up their chains and began wrapping themselves to their trees, while other protesters swarmed up the trees to help. Simon was the only kid who chose to remain in his tree, which he had dubbed Gandhi. He felt all around Gandhi's trunk, which was the size of a water barrel. He knew that the least knobbly side was on the other side of the trunk from the platform. When a helper climbed up to help him, Simon swung to the other side of Gandhi's trunk, clinging like a limpet as a volunteer fastened them together until Simon's body was crisscrossed with chains and he could relax against Gandhi's rough bark. We're reminding everyone that you risk getting a criminal record for this action. Simon nodded, and the volunteer descended, taking the ladder with him. Simon hung there, trying to relax. He liked the feeling of hugging Gandhi, their two hearts beating against each other. The ones who had decided to leave voluntarily went home to await the court hearing. The area thinned out. The police started removing people from their trees by force. Simon closed his eyes and focused on Gandhi's rough skin against his own. There were sounds of a scuffle, and someone cried out. Simon began to sing, Gandhi, Gandhi, you're my beautiful tree. It doesn't matter what they do to me. We're all just irrelevant cogs, you see, but every cog has a legacy to live a worthwhile life or not to be. Come on, kid, it's time to get down now. A gigantic police officer was standing below him. Sorry, Simon said. We have to stop cutting down trees. We have to stop consuming so much. We have to do it now. The policeman got a ladder and climbed up to the platform. A second policeman followed him. Come on, kid, party's over. Does this look like a party to you? Simon said, wrapping his arms more securely around the tree, even as one officer took a pair of wire cutters and began to crack through the links of his chain. The other one read out his rights and told him why he was being detained and that he could get legal advice from a lawyer. Simon interrupted him. Don't you believe what the scientists are telling us? We're causing the climate emergency. We need to stop. Don't you want your kids to breathe? One of the policemen unwrapped the chain while the other unwrapped Simon's arms. Simon clasped Gandhi hard with his legs. I'm fighting for the right to breathe for the rest of my life. I'm fighting for your children. You're starting to get on my nerves, kid, the first police officer said, and jerked Simon's leg roughly. He gave a cry more in surprise than anything else. Police brutality! Someone shouted from below. Simon peered down and saw a little crowd surrounding Gandhi's base. Several were filming with their cameras. The officers tried to pry him loose again, one holding Simon by his arms while the other tried to unwrap his legs. It was difficult to unwrap two legs from different directions at the same time. Simon was squirming like an eel and kicking. The officer lost patience and shoved one of Simon's legs out so far to the side that he cried out again. Why don't you taser him? A sarcastic voice from below suggested. Yeah, another voice called out. A kid clinging to a tree should be tortured. A chorus of, he's just a kid, and shame rippled around the base of the tree. Simon wished his mother was there. Suddenly, the officers released his limbs and went into a huddle at the edge of the platform. Simon overheard words like, just a kid and different procedure. One approached Simon. We're coming back tomorrow. You'll be removed from this tree tomorrow, do you hear? Simon didn't answer, but he pressed his heart closer to Gandhi's hard bark. Once the police had left, carting the other resistant tree huggers off in their police vans, Simon shrugged off his broken chains and collapsed onto his sleeping bag. He felt exhausted. One person brought him something to eat, and another brought a new chain, taking away the broken links of the old one. People began to trickle away. Simon was delighted to hear his mother's voice call up to him sometime later. He didn't want to leave his tree and managed to convince Rakita to fetch a ladder and join him on his platform. She sat beside him and laid out all the good things she had brought to eat as he relayed the events of the day. He sat with his back against Gandhi, his pillow protecting him from the worst knobs, and devoured boiled eggs and fresh buttered bread with cheese, tomatoes, and olives. He was ravenous. As he came to the end of his account, he saw his mother wasn't eating anything. Aren't you hungry? Oh, I feel like I don't know you. When did you get so brave? Simon smiled and took a long drink of water. But now it's time to come home. Simon shook his head. I'm not coming home, Mum. Don't be ridiculous. You can't stay here alone, Simon. You've done such a great job. You transformed every kid here into a climate activist. You need to continue this work, and it's not going to save the world if you get hurt tonight. It'll cause a little flare in the news for a few days, and then people will forget. You need to stay safe. Simon thought for a moment. I don't think my life is at risk, he said slowly. And I do think that staying here is making a much bigger statement than slinking home. So I'm staying, Mum. Come home for tonight, please, Simon. You can't stay here alone. I can't stand it, Simon. Don't you care about the suffering you're causing me? There was a catch in Nikita's voice. Simon put a hand on her arm. I can't bear that I'm causing you suffering, Mum, but I have to do what I have to do. Nikita took a tissue out of her pocket and blew her nose furiously, but she didn't say anything else. Everyone trickled away towards dusk, and Nikita stood up and gathered up what she'd brought. You can't stay out here on your own. Something might happen to you. I'll bring a sleeping bag for myself and I'll be back in a couple of hours. Simon felt relief. Don't you want to come with me to get the sleeping bags? Stretch your legs? Simon had been talked at and photographed all day. He was tired. A couple of hours alone sounded pretty good to him. He said he'd stay. Sometime after his mother had left, Simon found it hard to keep track of time up in the tree. He heard rustling in the silence of the forest. He thought it might be a deer and moved to the edge of his platform to look. What he saw made his heart tremble in his chest. Men were converging on his tree from every angle. He recognized a couple of them. They were mill workers and tree fellers. He took deep breaths to calm himself and got slowly to his feet. He phoned his mother and told her what was happening. Several men were dragging ladders towards Simon's tree. I'll phone the police. They'll be right there, Nikita said in a voice laced with controlled panic. Simon closed his eyes for a second. Be brave, he thought. It's just a few moments. I'm doing this for the greater good. He lifted his phone and began to film them, delivering a loud commentary at the same time. You can see workers are carrying batons and wire cutters. Perhaps some of them have knives and guns. Around 20 armed men against one kid. Simon turned the phone around. Me. The first ladder banged against his platform, and Simon left the edge of the platform to shove his phone into the hole in Gandhi's trunk. Another ladder clanged against his platform. He rushed over to the first ladder and peered down. The man was almost there. Simon grabbed the rungs of the ladder and threw it away from his platform as hard as he could. The ladder fell backwards and the man cried out, but Simon didn't wait to see what had happened to him. He jumped to the other side and shoved the end of the ladder off the other platform. He did wonder for a moment if his behavior was strictly non-violent and a true Gandhi-like spirit, but he told himself that he wouldn't lift a hand against them when they got to him. He was just delaying the attack in the hope that help would arrive. Two more ladders clanged against opposite sides of the platform. Other men were climbing up Gandhi's trunk, using her generous boughs as stepping stones. Simon didn't have time to think. There was no time to fear. He rushed back and forth, dislodging as many ladders as he could reach. Two men slithered from the trunk onto the platform at the same time. One grabbed Simon's arms and he braced himself for the punch. The greater good, he thought, as several more men joined the first two captors. Where's this fucking phone? He heard one of them yell. His head exploded in a burst of pain as a fist connected with the side of his face. Simon offered no resistance, letting himself go loose like a rag doll. And it really was only a few minutes. When Simon woke up, he was in hospital and his mother was by his side. How are you feeling? She asked. Simon touched his body gingerly. There was a bandage encircling his head and his arm was in a cast, but he couldn't feel any pain at all. I'm sorry to cause you all this worry, Mum. She smiled through her tears. My darling boy, don't worry about that. You're so brave. Simon closed his eyes again. Is my phone still in Gandhi's trunk? It was in a hole about 6 feet up from the platform. Under some leaves, he whispered before he fell asleep. The next time he woke up, Nikita asked how he had done it. It doesn't matter what happened to me. In the face of human extinction, Mum. Nikita placed his phone on his chest. I hope you don't mind that I took the liberty of posting the video you took on your website. It's gone viral.
What a fantastic reading. The whole time I was just sitting there imagining a library with a circle of kids looking up and listening to you and just wanting so badly to read that book. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Welcome.
I love Simon. I mean, I'm a fan of a bully story. I don't know why. I just love the potential of a victim getting one over on the bullies. When you sat down to write Reversing Time, when you thought about Simon and you thought about all of the other characters in the book, did you know right off the bat this was going to be his situation? He was going to be this, small, timid kid who had people after him? Or was that something that came when you thought more about the themes and ideas of the book?
I guess I felt that the most satisfying books, as you say, it's true when you have a big enemy, and somehow that that's overcome. That's very satisfying. But also when the protagonist grows, like if the protagonist stays the same throughout the book, then it's not quite this. You identify. I wanted people to really identify with Simon and feel that he was a relatable human being, and he was very timid. He was not a coward. That's too strong a word. Who wouldn't be frightened of bullies? But he was a frightened, fearful human being, and when he was faced, I feel like almost in a way it's a little bit the same as all of the young people. I think there's a lot of despair among young people, a lot of apathy, a lot of fear about the future, and I feel that action is actually the only way to remove that fear and that apathy. I mean, people are going to therapists, so I've got climate anxiety. Try doing something, because really it's all 8 billion of us. We can say, oh, the corporations and oh, China, but actually it's us. And I feel I want people to be able to relate to Simon. I wanted him to grow. So he had to start off frightened and become strong.
Yeah. And he's got this dysfunctional family, which is that sort of complicated, I guess, not dysfunctional, complicated family relationships exist in your previous 2 books as well, with social justice and advocacy kind of in the background. Is that important to you in everything that you write, to have that the real complicated relationships and the real complicated relationship we have to, as you say, social justice? If you're not doing something, you feel.
Well, that's such an interesting question. I think, yes, I think that's right. I think that I'm always contemplating what it really changes. Like I see my own growth as a human being or as a writer as I go through. Because of course, when I wrote a hero, I was really, I thought that racism was the worst problem, and it was about, I felt that the most insidious and racism was Islamophobia, because a lot of other racism are kind of slightly more white when you think of it that way. As not, I work at the university. I'm a writer. I don't meet anybody who's racist in that way, but I met people that worked at the university who were a little bit anti-Islam because of the way that the women are treated, whatever the reasons are. It seems to be much more pervasive and much more dangerous, because of course, in 9/11, all these things, this is not it was growing as Islamophobia. So I wrote a book because I wanted people to really identify people. You write about people that you can identify with, and you see, oh my gosh, culture is much less important than the fact that we love and we have power struggles and we hate and we're these human beings. We're all exactly the same, and our culture impacts us a little bit, sure, of course it does, but much less than the very fact of our humanness. So that's what I was trying to bring out with that book. And now, of course, I think for me the climate crisis is really absorbing me and obsessing me. And so to write a book where people can identify, a lot of people have dysfunctional, broken homes, and Simon's home breaks up. You make this kid real, but then and the situation is completely real. Obviously, the fantasy is there to enliven it and make it a really interesting, because you've got to grip kids. If they're not engaged, they're not going to finish the book. They're not going to learn anything. So you need to throw in those elements almost as a, how do I really grasp the imagination of a child and engage them right to the end. But also galvanize the idea that all of us are individually responsible for our own actions, and the way to live a conscientious life, perhaps today, is to live as though we're actually in a crisis, which some of us are still not quite doing.
And I love that Simon's parents, whom he adores, both of them, are complicated themselves, right? His dad works in the oil industry, and that's food on the table. That is something he can't walk away from easily. And that is kind of a metaphor for the real oil industry, right? Something that we can't just walk away from. And then on the other side, we've got his mom, who's anti-consumerism, anti-capitalism, and everything that we aspire, or we should be aspiring to be. And I loved that they were his parents because he has to love and understand them, right? He's forced to love and understand both sides of it, as we need to understand both sides of it here. How did you think about that when you were creating those characters, and how they would be kind of deposited into this bigger argument about the climate crisis and versus the oil industry?
I'm impressed by your questions, Alison. They're really thoughtful questions. There's a scene in the book where Simon, I thought about that a lot. This is not a polarized issue, and it really isn't. And I feel in a way that that if anybody ever did a survey and they took a million people on the left, because it's supposed to be left-right issue, and a million people on the right, and measured their footprints, they might be very surprised by what they discover. I think most left people are talking the talk, but not in any way, or not in any significant way more than right, you know. So he actually goes and visits. I don't call him right and left, obviously, but he goes and visits, and he goes and visits the future. He's talking to two people. He actually goes to Sandra's home, and Sandra's home is her father's. So he's sitting there, big fat man, big appearance, was saying, you know, the climate crisis is bull, it's nothing. Whatever. So these rich people, and he's sort of denying. He's a climate denier, really. And then he, in the same, like the trip immediately afterwards, he finds himself in the future when he's about 30 years old, and he's with this old woman who he doesn't know, and she's saying, you know, oh, I'm going to go and fly to this. She's a very, you know, I tried to make her, I mean, she's only got a couple of pages. She's not a very significant figure, but she's, you know, your quintessential boomer, left-wing boomer. So you know, she's spent her whole life fighting against sexism and racism, all these things. She's a very ideological person, but she's flying to these rallies all over the place. She's actually flying to rallies in different states in the US, and he's saying to her, you've got to stop flying. It's not, you can't be, your one presence in that rally, you're just spewing poison into the air. And she was absolutely furious at the idea that she wasn't very environmental and very righteous person, because they like to think of themselves, people like to think of themselves as righteous and good. And I just think that it's really, everybody's kind of slightly, you know, a lot of people, having said that, I would say, I feel like I'm part of this huge, massive tsunami of change happening globally. I think that I really have the most hope that I've ever had. I really think that people are, you know, there's so much going on, and it's a really exciting time to be alive. I really do truly believe that, and try to also convey that to the book. But no, I don't think it's going to be a certain segment of society that's going to save us. It's going to be one human being at a time.
Yeah. And that, I mean, it's true. I'm just talking with my daughter yesterday in the Junction neighborhood, this tiny little store that was once a little place that you went to refill your soaps and your dish soap and your laundry detergent or whatever, has just taken over a really big space in the Junction. And just that in and of itself, I thought, well, that's hopeful. You know, the fact that this little company of refills and environmentally friendly soaps and detergents, et cetera, is doing so well that they've got this bigger space. I felt hopeful, just that little tiny thing. But I agree with you. You know, people are complicated, right? And I love the scene where he's got Tupperware containers in his backpack and metal straws, and they're going to a restaurant, and just in thinking, you know, I thought, how many people would want to do that, but don't do it because they don't want to be the person who pulls Tupperware out at the end of dinner and says, can you put my leftovers in this? Right? Like, it's such a complicated thing. And you do that, you present these characters perfectly, like with all of their complicatedness, which is great. And so I want to talk to you about YA and fantasy fiction. I always feel like, well, a lot of writers I talk to feel like because they've got a young kid in the book, it immediately makes it YA. But in reading Reversing Time, I thought this is quite a mature book, like with the language and just the voice and the style. I thought it's quite a mature book. And I wanted to ask you, was it always a YA novel? Did you know from the start it was going to be a YA novel?
It's my first YA novel. I guess I feel that when you're watching something like a Shrek, let's say, a movie, and a kid that's watching Shrek is taking the storyline, what they're getting is a plot, and they're looking at the plot, and the witticisms and the innuendos, and that is a different level. So a really good, I'm not saying that this is like that, but I think that the best novels and the best movies or whatever, the best stories exist at several levels. So that and I definitely wanted it to be for children, because I think that that is the age group that we need to galvanize. But of course, I do think that it's going to be for, and it slightly bothers me that we've always like, there's sometimes competitions and they say, oh, it's from grade 4 to 6. I'm thinking like, or genres, this isn't really a fantasy book. Like I had one fantasy reviewer sort of say, oh, it's, there's this big slow bit in the middle where the mother's reading her diary. And it's like, that's because he's expecting fantasy. Like it bothers me that we have to say it's this age group or all this, why? This is a book for everybody. Adults can completely enjoy it. And I had a kid as young as 8 who's obviously a very precocious reader, but he really enjoyed it on a different level. And he, and I find it slightly difficult that that you have a bit of fantasy in there, because even though it's a realist, it's fiction. It's a literary fiction. It's like, a lot of character development, but a fantasy reader doesn't want character development. So do I try to attract the character development people who might say, what's this magic going on? That's a bit, I find it a little, it kind of just limits your ability to be free. So I don't think that much about it. I consciously went out and took all the sex out of it after I'd given it to YA people to read, and they said, you can't have this, that, and the other. I'd have a lot more passion between Simon and Sandra. Passion, but they told me to take it out. So I did do things. I took out most swear words. That's basically one of the main differences, I think.
Yeah, it's funny because talking about Louise Penny and honest criticism, I sent Reversing Time to my niece's daughter in Sarnia. I bought it from a little bookseller there and had it delivered to her. And she didn't tell me what page she got to, but she got a ways in and closed it up and said, I can't read anymore.
Because of the mother?
I don't know. She's afraid to be honest. I have to wait till I see her in person. She's afraid to be honest because she's afraid of hurting my feelings. Even though I said to my niece, I don't care if she loves the book or doesn't love the book. It's not my book. I just wanted her to read it and talk to me about it. So I'm interested I'm going to ask her what page she got to, and then I'm going to talk to her about what it was that made her go, oh no, I can't.
And you must tell me too.
What's that?
You have to pass that on to me, Alison, because I
will. Yeah. She reads constantly. She reads epic books that are, 800 pages, 3 or 4 of them a week, but she's very particular.
How old is she?
11.
11.
Yeah. And talking about fantasy fiction, anytime there's a book, I love time travel. Anytime there's a book with time travel, I immediately want to talk about or think about, if I'm not in conversation with the author, how time travel plays its own role in the book. And it doesn't necessarily have to be, an allegory like it would be described in fantasy fiction. But what do you see time travel? What do you see time travel's role in this book?
Do you know the Selkie story?
The Selkie?
It's an Irish, so the farmer sees these beautiful women dancing, and he falls in love with one of them, and then when they finish dancing, they wrap seal skins around, turn into seals, and dive back, and he steals one of the women's seal skins so that she is forced to stay with him and marry him. They have children together, and she's very, very sad. And one day she finds a seal skin and she leaves her children. She's had children with this man and the farmer. They're saying, please don't leave us, we're your family. She said, I had another family in the sea. Right, I have another family. The realization that he had stolen it was completely the end of for her, and that was kind of what the idea of the talisman and the mother. This isn't answering your question, I guess. The idea of the relationship of the man, the woman, and the fact that he did steal the talisman, because he loved her and he wanted to stay with him. I tried to do it in a sympathetic enough way so that the man, you don't sort of feel like, oh, this is a terrible thing for the man to do. One understands that type of incredible love. He definitely totally pure and altruistic, but in every way except for that, I need you to be with me. So that was it. It was based on that selfie story, and the fantasy, the travel, the time travel. I was trying to think if somebody. Who is it that has, what is it that's causing people to not understand is if you go a little bit, if you even just 30 years down the road, if we could just see what's going to happen 30 years down the road, we would really say, wow, if I do, this is the difference between 1.5, which is baked in, and 3.6, which, is where we'll get to if we don't make a change. So everybody sort of said, oh, it's a bit too late, or, oh, it's too big a thing. 1.5 is actually not that bad. There's a little bit of water rising. We might have a couple of horrific storms a year. 3.6, there's whole cities underwater, massively more climate refugees looking for places, and 20 horrific storms a year. It's just like, it's a completely different thing for our children. We're talking about our children's lives now. So at this point, it's like, how do you? So I wanted people to, I didn't want Simon to be able to use the talisman all the time and time travel all the time in this book, because I really wanted people to see what you can actually do without any magical powers, every human being, so that they can, again, as an identify, relatable thing. But I did want him to know absolutely clearly and be frustrated in the same way that sometimes I feel, I want him to feel that sort of, and you can only kind of do that if you really know this is going to happen, and yes, we can prevent it.
Yes.
Still.
Yeah. And that's the part of the novel where he goes, I think this is what you're alluding to, is that he goes back and he does something that he's not supposed to do in history, but then when he comes forward, he sees that small thing actually made a big difference.
Yes.
Yeah. That's I've got my questions all completely out of order now. Yeah, it's hard, and you talked about Zelensky beforehand. It's hard to not imagine this as a political discussion, but in the novel that doesn't really play out. Like if you imagined this as a film, if you imagined this as a series, there would definitely be politicians involved, way more than we see now. Right now, we've just got the oil industry advocates, throwing stones and being goofballs. How do you see the politicians who aren't in the book? Like, did you imagine them when you were sitting down and writing it?
The politicians who aren't in the book. I'm not sure I quite understand that.
So for me, it's the idea that there are bigger players in this story, in the climate crisis story, but they don't live in the book. Was it an active decision to not have that kind of political side of it, to keep it very domestic and familial?
I see. I guess I felt that if it was very political, then that would be less appealing to YA readers. And I also feel like he does. It is a premier. The father has this connection with the premier or the prime minister or whatever. So there are the political figures do, because I do think that that's a huge part of it. This is kind of focusing on what individuals can do, because people are slightly moving forward. I've heard people often say, "What does it matter what I do?" Corporations, and I've even heard people say, "What does it matter what Canada does? China?" And it's like, wow, it's like dominoes. There's a huge thing going on all over the world like that. When you actually plugged into it, you realize how, and so, and it is all individual people sort of saying, hey, and as with Martin Luther King, you can think of, or suffragettes, you can think of always little groups of people that start out and sort of make this huge change because they advocate. And in this particular case, I think that there's so many countries that already experience it in a negative way, like temperatures of 40 degrees and horrendous things like that the whole summer now, and in some places in the Middle East. So I think I think that politicians, they're absolutely crucial. They're crucial because they are going to make, like, just like mask wearing in Nova Scotia, the minute that they said stop wearing masks, everybody, the next day, nobody was wearing masks, right? So we are, most of us are law abiding. And so it's really crucial that we push. I write a lot of petitions to the government. I do a lot of that type of advocacy too. But in my writing, I think for a YA audience, perhaps, I wanted to have it in the background as being, yes, these are the ones that can make really big immediate changes, and very important to have them in some way there, but not necessarily too much, I guess. Yeah.
What are you working on right now? Are you working on any new fiction?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am. So when right now there's I have a woman who she's very, very old. She's about 115, and she's living in a little we find out later, a technological bubble with a million other human beings that has, you know, that has been launched away from the earth because of the climate crisis, and she's going back, and she's actually embroiled in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in her youth.
Oh wow!
Yeah, so she's 150 now, and she's going back to in the earth, and about 2028. So about this time, and I lived in Israel for a while, and she falls in love with a Palestinian leader who's going to be also like a really sizzling love affair, getting in that sex, which I really enjoy writing, which I had to take out of reversing time. So a sizzling love affair, but most of it is like she's living in this technological bubble with her daughter of 80, and they have this funny little relationship, and she's always looking at photos and mourning, like, why did I focus on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict? And I chose that conflict, first of all, because I know it best, but also because it's one of the longest running conflicts. And it's like, I want the world to see, it's like, we keep on focusing, oh, COVID, let's focus on that now. It's like, well, yeah, sure, but only if it doesn't impact our moving towards saving the human race from extinction. So that's the message behind that book, like the absurdity of focusing on these things which are going to be so relevant in like 25 years. Yeah.
That is fantastic. That sounds amazing. I love the idea of starting a novel. You think it's just a regular place, and then it turns out to be a technology, like a bubble. That's fantastic. Charlotte, thank you so much for joining us today. This was a fabulous conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed Reversing Time, and I hope other people can read it. In so doing, we have 2 copies from Guernica to raffle off. And what we've been doing recently, which has been great, is we're raffling off one here today, and we're raffling off one on social media. So I've been doing tweets and stuff, and putting names of people who share and retweet into another raffle for the other copy.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So Kaylee, we're going to do the first book.
Yeah. All right, our winner for today is Marsha Wynn. Marsha Wynn.
Marsha Wynn.
See their face. Marsha, if you can email me to junctionwrites@gmail.com. If you've already read the book, or if you want to nominate a young reader, that would be fantastic. We can send it directly to them, or send it to you, and you can gift the book for them.
Marsha, I want you to read it too. I want you to read it too. Your niece as well, but you as well.
I will send it to my niece. Love it. Nice. Thank you so much again, Charlotte. Thank you everybody for coming. We've only got 3 more events of the season. I'm so excited. In a couple of weeks, we're sitting with Anna Dowdall and talking about her novel, and Dorothy Kerfuffle is coming to talk about her improv comedy, and Kevin Wilson, K.R. Wilson, who is up there in the corner, is going to be our season closer. So once again, thank you so much, and have a great Sunday.
Thank you very much. Happy Mother's Day.
Thank you. Bye, everybody. Bye, Kaylee. Thank you.